1.3 Sexual Objectification. Some feminist philosophers argue that pornography violates the moral imperative to treat people as autonomous, rational subjects. According to Alison Asseter, the master-slave dialectic seems to capture the relation between people in pornographic eroticism. In much pornography, people, usually women, become objects for another. In the case of pornography, what happens is that one person becomes a body desired by the other, but this is not reciprocated. To treat someone as merely a body for another's use, without recognizing that she too is a subject with desires, is to treat someone as a slave, as a subhuman creature or object, and therefore violates her dignity as a human being. Asseter explains that for Hegel, the master-slave dialectic is a phase in the development of world history, in the progression towards freedom of the spirit that controls historical change. In fact, the relation is disadvantageous both for the slave and for the master, for neither gains the form of recognition necessary for self-conscious awareness and emotional fulfillment. Asseter also argues that the role of the wife in marriage is very like that of the slave, for the wife's social identity is subsumed by her husband who holds social power, and thus she is not a social subject in her own right. Harry Broad argues that pornography harms men individually even while it augments men's collective power. Broad also employs a Hegelian framework and writes, "The female is primarily there as a sex object, not sexual subject, or, if she is not completely objectified, since men do want to be desired themselves, hers is at least a subjugated subjectivity. But one needs another independent subject, not an object or a captured subjectivity, if one either wants one's own prowess validated, or if one simply desires human interaction. Men functioning in the pornographic mode of male sexuality, in which men dominate women, are denied satisfaction of these human desires. For Broad, then, pornography enhances men's political power over women, while diminishing the quality of men's intersubjective relationships with women, and thereby contributes to the loss of positive sexual interaction and self-realization. Broad also argues that pornography contributes to the commodification of sexuality, which enhances men's powers as consumers, although not necessarily their genuine autonomy and freedom. Catherine MacKinnon invokes Kant's idea of persons as ends to explain the moral problem of pornography. A person, in one Kantian view, is a free and rational agent whose existence is an end in itself, as opposed to instrumental. In pornography, women exist to the end of male pleasure. For MacKinnon, pornography involves men treating women as mere instruments in order to satisfy their sexual desires. Such treatment, at best, fails to recognize women as free and equal persons, and at worst dehumanizes women and encourages their victimization. In response to MacKinnon's claims about the role of sexual objectification in women's lives, Martha Nussbaum has asked whether sexual objectification is always morally objectionable, or whether it is only so in certain contexts. Nussbaum identifies 7 distinct kinds of actions that may or may not be part of objectification in any given instance: instrumentality, denial of autonomy, inertness, fungibility, violability, ownership, and denial of subjectivity. Some of these actions are always morally problematic, but some of them are acceptable when they are part of a larger relationship involving mutual respect. Nussbaum writes, "Denial of autonomy and denial of subjectivity are objectionable if they persist throughout an adult relationship, but as phases in a relationship characterized by mutual regard, they can be all right, or even quite wonderful. In a closely related way, it may at times be splendid to treat the other person as passive or even inert. Emotional penetration of boundaries seems potentially a very valuable part of sexual life, and some forms of physical boundary penetration also, though it is less clear which ones these are. Treating as fungible is suspect when the person so treated is from a group that has frequently been commodified and used as a tool or a prize. Between social equals, these problems disappear. In other words, some actions in which we use another's body sexually are consistent with recognizing the person so used as an end and do not involve treating her as a mere object in the Kantian sense. But Nussbaum concludes that most conventional pornography, such as Playboy, fails to meet the Kantian moral standard and depicts a thoroughgoing fungibility and commodification of sex partners, and in the process severs sex from any deep connection with self-expression or emotion. Nussbaum therefore concurs with Mackinnon that Playboy treats women as mere objects or trophies that can both enhance men's status and be exchanged for the next sex object at will. Laurie Schrage questions the Kantian account of sexual desire that underlies Mackinnon's analysis of sexual objectification. Kant holds that the expression and fulfillment of sexual desire are uniquely powerful in their ability to dehumanize and objectify others. Sexual desire is fundamentally an animal urge that is fulfilled by taking control of another's body, in a way that disrespects their autonomy and humanity in almost all contexts. Mackinnon turns Kant's anti-sex view into an anti-porn one, by arguing that the expression and fulfillment of sexual desire under patriarchy involves men taking control of women's bodies in a way that fails to respect women as persons. Schrage argues that Kant and Mackinnon illegitimately assume that the expression and fulfillment of sexual desire are uniquely powerful in their ability to objectify others, and both equate sexualizing someone with the failure to respect her humanity and autonomy. Schrage debunks these assumptions in part by appealing to Nussbaum's critiques of Kant's account of sexual desire. Schrage argues that the use of others involved in pornography is not incompatible with respect for their autonomy and personhood, as long as consumers and producers respect the ends of porn actors. These ends include the desire to exploit for economic gain others' sexual interest in them and their bodies within the conventional boundaries set by various genres of sexual representation and entertainment. The relationship between porn stars and consumers of their images are market relationships and should be held to the norms of those relationships, not the norms of friendships and romance. If sex workers need help from feminists, it should be aimed at protecting their rights as workers, not at protecting them from being sexualized by men outside the personal or family sphere. Jennifer Saul explores the possible connection between objectification, treating people as things, and personification, treating things as people. Saul critiques earlier feminist claims that men's use of pornographic images involves treating pieces of paper like women, and therefore involves conflating women with inanimate instruments. The inclusion of real women in pornography in a single category, e.g. the category of entities that can arouse and satisfy sexual desire, can undermine respect for women and promote oppressive practices. Saul argues that personification and objectification are only linked in troubling ways if some conditions for morally problematic objectification are already met. Saul draws on Rachel Mains's historical work on the development of a device now known as the personal vibrator, and contends that women's use of vibrators to achieve sexual pleasure and orgasm represents a form of personification. For some women, vibrators eventually replaced a service that had been provided by doctors and midwives and spas. Yet this is not a troubling form of personification, one linked to troubling forms of objectification, because doctors are not likely to be confused with sex toys as a result of women's masturbatory use of vibrating technology. Doctors have other acknowledged medical uses as well as ends of their own. Therefore, the transformation of their historical role in treating sexually frustrated or hysteric women by both new understandings of women's reproductive and sexual health and advancements in vibrator technology does not contribute to the oppression of doctors. Saul's discussion for the possible equation of people and things, and the background circumstances that may permit this, is useful for considering some new technological developments in pornography. New digital imaging and personal computer technologies enable users to interact and have sex with playmate animations on one's computer screen. Computer-mediated interactions with digitally simulated but fictional people can sometimes be difficult to distinguish from computer-mediated online interactions with real people. Yet such pornographic possibilities do not necessarily involve morally troubling objectification, as long as background conditions enable the recognition of women as subjects and the recognition more generally of flesh and blood humans as autonomous agents.